I want to thank Youngmoo Kim very much for bringing this lovely piano here for me, and Dan Ellis as well for organizing this session. I'm from the University of Southern California, where I teach in the Viterbi School of Engineering. I'm affiliated with Industrial and Systems Engineering because my training was in operations research and also with the Electrical Engineering Department, and I have a courtesy appointment in the music school. So today I'm going to tell you a bit about some of the projects we do in my lab, which is the Music Computation and Cognition Lab. The things that we do have to do with systematic study and computational modeling and scientific explanations of what humans do when we make music, as well as when we perceive and our mind works on music. So in music perception and cognition, the project that I'll present to you is MuseArt. It's our music real-time analysis and visualization system. And for music performance, we have a couple of projects, ESP and the Distributed Immersive Performance Projects. And I'm also going to tell you a bit about our educational initiatives and open courseware in this area. And finally, in composition and improvisation, we're going to focus on improv, and I'll show you the Mimi system. And you might wonder, who are some of the crazy people that do this stuff? There are quite a few of us. And this is a conference that was organized by Youngmoo and Dan right here in 2008 in Philadelphia. And this is a community, Izmir, that has over 1,500 people worldwide. You can join our mailing list, Music IR, and learn about what are the kinds of things that the community thinks about. Another community that is also interested in this area is the Society for Mathematics and Computation in Music. This is a bit newer than the Izmir community and had its first conference in Berlin in 2007, and the second one at Yale University in 2009. And the next one will be in Paris at IRCAM. And the keynote speaker there will be Pierre Boulez. And speaking of rock stars, Pierre Boulez is one of the rock stars of this field. So you will see a little progress bar. So you see how far along I am in my presentation. So we'll start with MuseArt. Okay, so my entry into this field was through a mathematical model for tonality called the spiral array. And since then, I've developed it into an interactive application with my collaborator, Alex Francois. And I'm going to just go through really quickly the kinds of things you can do with a mathematical model. And as engineers, you're going to get this right away. If you don't worry too much, but you're familiar with similar things in your fields. With a representation, you can quickly do recognition of key finding through a nearest neighbor search in the space. And you can also do things such as segmentation, where you can find the maximum distance between consecutive windows, and therefore that implies that there is a change. And pitch spelling, whenever you have a MIDI instrument and you need to map it into score-like notation, you need to do pitch spelling that turns numbers into letter names. You can also use this as a visualization tool to understand tonality. This is a concert that I've given in numerous places that uses the MuseArt application that you're about to see. And it's been written up and given at MIT as well. And over on the left, you see the software architecture. This is how the system was designed. When you have an interactive system like this, there are numerous streams of data that need to be processed, and you actually need to think about how you program something like this. So a nice mathematical model that's efficient is not enough. The implementation issues are also important. You can use this visualization tool to analyze music. You can also use it to understand musical humor. For example, when it's doing something expected, it sort of stays in the closed region. And when it's doing something unexpected or perhaps funny, it does something like this. Okay. And we've shown this because it's a bit funny at the Ig Nobel Prize Awards, which is a spoof on the Nobel Prize Awards. So at this point, I'm going to just quit out of this presentation and show you MuseArt. So on the outermost spiral that you see there, these are pitch representations. They're pitch classes. So when I play C, they all map to the same note. So this is just, they're all classified the same way. And if I play things that are in a triad, they outline the points that give you this triangle. If I give you a minor triad, okay. And the closest key, this is C major. This is how C major feels on a keyboard. And you also see here that it recognizes it as C major on the red helix. This is double helix in the middle. The red one represents major keys. The blue one represents minor keys. And once the key is recognized, it's labeled here with a dodecahedron that shows you that it's the key of C. So if I play something like Bach's Prelude in C, which is in the key of C, that's the key of C, and the chord of C, you're hearing the chord of C in the key of C. All right, now we're in the chord of D minor, but we're still in the key of C. Whoops. Whoops. Okay, so now we're in the chord of G and still in the key of C. A minor, D major, G major. Okay, so you can see how this analyzes music on the fly as I'm playing. So that was music by J.S. Bach. I'm going to play you a spoof on this by P.D.Q. Bach. I'm going to stop right here, and he ends it. Whoops. Oh, sorry. Oh, you have to see this again. Okay, when I'm doing something expected, you see it moving around here. And when I did that jazzy thing in the end, it sort of moves down over here because it's not moving where you might expect it to in the classical genre. Okay, so I can leave this up at break time so that others can play with it, but I'll move on right now. Okay, you can do sort of things like analyzing what pedaling does. Oops. What pedaling does to music like that. It actually smoothens out the analysis because the pedaling retains the sounds, and you can see how much it smoothens the analysis. We've also put in Glenn Gould's performances to see what kinds of analyses we get, because a performance is not a direct playback of the score. A performance actually has manipulations of the notes in time to emphasize different tonal structures. So different performances will actually outline, even though they're of the same piece, they'll outline different trajectories in the space. This is another Goldberg variation by Glenn Gould. Okay, so that's MuseArt. And at this point, we'll move on to ESP. You heard in the previous talk by Dan that an instrument is kind of part of the performer's persona. And I happen to play the piano. And when you play the piano and you know the notes, all you're thinking about when you actually perform are how you're going to express those notes. And one of the things you think about is the speed at which you play back the notes. And if you're sitting behind a keyboard and you have pedals to press and you're thinking about speed, this is very much like driving a car. Okay? So everyone knows how to drive a car, but not everyone knows how to play an instrument. So we decided to make it possible for anyone to be able to create an expressive performance through a driving interface. Okay, so you might say, I understand how the speed works. The accelerator makes the music faster, the brakes makes you slow down, but what is the wheel for? Okay, so what the wheel does is there's a road that you're supposed to drive on, and when you're supposed to slow down, we make a huge bend in the road to encourage you to slow down. And if you can speed up, then the road is straight and you can do whatever you want. There's still lots of latitude for expressive decisions, even in this interface, and you'll see over here how this interface works. Oh, there should be sound.
Of music is very much like driving a car. In ESP, we take this metaphor to the next level.
The lines coming at you are one per beat, so you know how fast you're driving.
By driving a virtual car. In ESP, the pedals control the speed of the car, which is directly linked to the tempo of the piece. Depressing the right pedal causes the music to accelerate, and the left pedal, the brakes, causes it to slow down. The speedometer shows the current tempo in beats per minute. The dynamics of the piece, that is to say, the loudness, is coupled with the acceleration and deceleration.
So over here you see the speedometer. The nice thing about the speedometer in beats per minute is that it corresponds to what we're used to seeing when we're driving a car. 60 is moderate, 120 is fast, 40 and 20 are slow. So it's the same in music.
With its twists and turns. Bends in the road encourage the driver to slow down. And straight sections suggest speeding. The resulting map shows...
Well, this video is online, so you can watch the rest of it and how you might perform this piece, which is Brahms' Hungarian Dance No. 5, the way you want to. Okay, so this received a lot of coverage when it first came out in 2005. It's also built using the software architecture by Alex Francois. And we've done things to it so that even if you're a really bad driver and you're hitting the road all the time, you still end up with a smooth tempo trajectory, so you can't play too badly. We also use it to examine different ways of interpreting a particular piece. So this is the same piece, but with two different roads. So the roads actually represent different ways of approaching the piece. So these are explorations with ESP so far. And at this point, I'm going to just break into and transition into how we use music and engineering as an educational tool to motivate students to design their own projects and do things they might not otherwise do without this motivator. So I teach a class every year that surveys different topics. This particular year, our topic was musical prosody and interpretation. All the readings and reports are online, as well as the student projects. And I'm going to highlight one or two, depending on time. For the first one, I'm going to show you Chandra's project on expressive instruments, where he examines the difference between playing one piece on a guitar and the same piece being played on a piano. So this is actually a piano piece that's played a lot by classical guitarists. And you'll see this is the tempo trajectory for piano performances of this piece, and that is the tempo trajectory of guitar performances of the piece. So we can actually systematically study the differences between the way people perform a piece depending on the instrument that they're playing on. So the notes are almost exactly the same. The transcription might differ slightly, but not too much. And you can see that it's quite different, the kinds of gestures that they end up making because of the instrument that they're playing. Another student, this is Murali, looked at the differences in which violinists do their vibrato. And he examined recordings from the turn of the century, of the last century, 1904 until 2002. And you can see that a vibrato in 1904 was pretty flat. You didn't really shake your hand too much to get a vibrato. And as you get through the years, it increased and increased, so that not only was there a vibrato, there was sort of a shape to this vibrato. And finally, we're back in 2002, and we're back to the flat curve again. So this is sort of you can track the trends in performance over time. This particular class happens to be one in which I recruit a lot of students into this kind of work. This is a doctoral student that just graduated 2 years ago, a couple years ago, Qinghua Chuan. And her work was in automatically style-specific accompaniment, where you could feed her system just a couple pieces, and it would learn the accompaniment style, for example, of your favorite Radiohead piece. And you could then give the system a melody that you create, and it would then accompany that melody in the style of the pieces that you've just given it. And the interesting thing about her system is that because style cannot be generalized over a very large data set, she made her system such that it could learn from only a few examples, so that it had individual style. And she's received a lot of recognition for this work, and next week she will get the best new investigator paper at the Grace Hopper celebration in Atlanta. So this is one way in which you can be an engineer and a rock star. So Qinghua actually does play in a rock band. Okay, so real quick, there was some mention of this little problem called the speed of light. It has a lot to do with time. And we have done some experiments in distributed performance where you have people playing over simulated distance, so with delay, because even at the speed of light, it's going to take you 60 milliseconds to cross the country, assuming you don't get any network delays. And we know that musicians can play with delay because even in an orchestra, there's auditory delay. That's why there's a conductor. And I'm going to show you one video that gives one of the results from this set of experiments that we did with two pianists. They're fabulous performers, the Toshev piano duo. They collaborated with us on this experiment where we had them play with each other the Poulenc piano sonata for 4 hands, and they had to play with auditory delay, and we measured all of their performances. So, of course, with more delay, the playing got further and further apart, and it was hard to coordinate. And this is just with 50 milliseconds delay, but this is a fast classical piece, which is not very tolerant of delays. They got very fed up after numerous such sessions, and in fact, they got quite mad at each other.
That's affected even our normal way of communication.
It was too much. It started getting on my nerve part. It felt that if we play a little slower, it'll be fine. But the slower you play, the slower it gets. And the slower you play, the slower it gets. And at some point, you might stop. But it makes you feel that it's going to be alright if you play slower. But now I have a confirmation and I prove that it doesn't work. You were asking whether with practicing it will improve. You may just be so fed up you didn't even keep up with some.
In this situation, we talked about this yesterday. We would never be satisfied at the moment when we play what we hear because it's not the way the audience hears it, right?
Can we both hear what the audience hears?
So they said they wanted to hear what the audience hears, which actually means delaying their own playing to their own ears. And so that's what we did.
Okay.
I truly enjoyed it. Now this you can practice and adjust and even make it perfect.
Tell me your impression of this setup as compared to the previous ones. You said you liked it
With
better.
one word, that's what I need. That's what
This
I
is
want.
what you
I
want.
just want to forget about it.
The delay through your headphones, does that bother you, or are you able to ignore it mentally?
I'm able to cope with it.
Yes, me too.
I would 100% prefer this one to the other. The other one is just very confusing. I wouldn't use it.
It's there are hundreds of things that confuses you in the other way.
Here, just everything. There, just need to adjust your touch a little bit.
Here's like we're on the same track.
We're on the same, yeah. We're like a real performance.
Okay, so now let's go back to the final project. Okay. In the final project, which is Mimi, we're looking at a system to help people learn about improvisation and to help us learn about improvisation. This was shown first at the Berlin Musical Instrument Museum in 2007, and that was an old version of Mimi. I'm going to show you now a new version of Mimi. Okay. What Mimi does is it learns from what I'm playing. And I'm going to do two things, one in F sharp and one in C. Two very different things, one on the black keys, one on the white keys. Okay, so Mimi's going to look at this and it's going to rearrange the music down here. It creates a data structure called a factor oracle, and it creates these transitions between parts of this fragment down here that are similar, and it starts playing back to me things that it gathers from here and remixes on the top. And I see it for 10 seconds before it sounds, so I can anticipate and actually play with it. And this happens to be the black key part. Okay, so you can play with an instrument like this, and we actually had Isaac Shankler perform with it in concert. And you'll see here, we had him also annotate exactly what he did. So he says, I start playing, and Mimi starts learning. And then Mimi starts improvising with a 10-second delay. Can you see? Oh, it's pretty dark. So that's Isaac playing and Mimi learning the music stream. And Mimi's now generating music. And he's playing now a second voice in counterpoint to that. And okay, so basically we had the composer, improviser, annotate exactly what he did to create this improvisation. And you can see the sections of the ideas being put out. He clears the memory at this point, starts a new section. He clears the memory again and starts another section. So we can actually study the architecture of this improv and how it's generated. Okay. And again, we'll be putting these videos online so you can look at it. I want to thank all my collaborators, in particular Alex Francois, whose software architecture enabled all our interactive systems. He's not only my collaborator in work, he's also my collaborator in life. And so here are further links to all of the material that's been presented.
So we have some time for quick questions for Elaine.
Hi, I'm Jack Longland from Penn State. So how much of a delay can a human tolerate when they're listening to themselves and trying to play with themselves before it all goes wrong?
Okay, so how much they can tolerate in playing with themselves, those are two different projects that were shown. Mimi, you play with yourself, but you actually don't experience delay. You actually get 10 seconds heads up on what's coming.
I mean with the case for the two performers.
The two performers, the distributed performance. For that one, we found that with the delay to their own ears from their own instruments, we could stretch the delay up to 65 milliseconds. And that's for a very fast piece and a very exacting piece in classical music, which doesn't tolerate much delay. And often when people do network performances, they actually make the delay a feature of that performance. And they improvise, so you don't actually need to line things up. So we were not interested in that kind of use of the network technologies. We're interested in just how far the human can tolerate. So experiments showed that 65 milliseconds was actually, that's a pretty decent window for as music goes.
I think it's pretty similar for humans trying to control airplanes. So
yes.
That's why I was asking about
right.
50 milliseconds to about 100 milliseconds, and then you're done. Then you're crashing your
right.
airplane. So.
And you're crashing in the piece too.
Francis De Los Reyes from NC State. So psychologists have this number, 10,000 hours, for anybody to be a virtuoso in any instrument. Does any of this work decrease that, or is that part of the objective?
Some of this is meant to reduce parts of that training, the time to parts of that training, by helping you visualize some of the things that you would learn over time. But it doesn't reduce the time to learn for your muscles to learn to play the instrument, because your muscles need the time to learn to play an instrument. But cognitively, there are certain things that you need to do after you learn how to play the instrument that defines just a regular player from really a thinking player. So this is what we're trying to reach for, to allow people to know what it means to think about the music, to be able to do things that one might not otherwise do. Yeah.
Armando Fox, Berkeley, over here.
Yes.
So you clearly you're an accomplished classical musician as well as doing all this work. On a purely personal level, as a musician, which of the projects that you've been involved in appeals to you most as a performer? When you get home, are there any of these things that you sort of play with and incorporate into your own playing for fun? And I'm also a pianist, so I kind of want to download some of this and use it. That's part of me.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, this is not things that I play with when I am doing my own thinking about music I'm performing. this is my way of communicating to others what it is that I myself and other musicians are doing, so that they might better understand what it is that it means. What do all these 10,000 hours of training mean? What are we doing when we just spend time up here playing an instrument? Because certainly there's a fun component, and there's the enjoyment of playing an instrument, but there's more to it than that. I mean, it's just like a job that any other person has. In your training as an engineer, we all learn to work with numbers, we learn to work with computers, and these are all skills, but to practice it at a level that actually becomes an art, what does that mean?
Thank you.
Let's thank our speaker before we...
All right, let's thank the panel again.
Bravo, bravo.